episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show, bringing you another really fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. Today we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Mindy Howard, future astronaut and founding director and lead trainer of Inner Space Training, an organization focused on psychologically and physiologically preparing commercial astronauts for their space flights, including psychological acclimation to different phases of flight, as well as optimizing for various conditions, creating peak performance, peak experience in space. She also serves as the director of inner space training at Blue Abyss Diving, which is a really unique human physiology and space sector research, training, and development facility with one of the world's deepest diving pools. Dr. Howard obtained her bachelor's and master's of science in industrial engineering at SUNY Buffalo and University of Massachusetts at Amherst, respectively, and her Ph.D. in industrial engineering from the Technical University Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And after obtaining her Ph.D., she applied to NASA and was placed on NASA's highly qualified astronaut candidate list. She began her career in the private sector at Royal Dutch Shell Group of companies, held several technical and leadership roles there, including responsibility for creating strategy and leading implementation globally across areas of sustainable development, social performance, environment, and carbon dioxide management in their gas and power division. She's also served as corporate responsibility manager at Aramco Overseas, part of the Saudi Aramco Oil Company, as well as a sustainable strategy manager at Aegon, the Dutch multinational life insurance company. Dr. Howard has also written numerous publications on various topics, including human factor design of cabins of spaceships, expert systems to help pilots with fault diagnosis and quality of group decision making as groups undergo several tasks in aerospace conditions. She successfully completed her certification of the National Aerospace Training Research Center Suborbital Sciences Training Program, which provides spaceflight physiology training for prospective suborbital scientists and astronauts, ultimately wishing to fly experiments on upcoming suborbital space missions. She's also a TEDx speaker with her recent TEDx talk, Train Your Fear Away Like an Astronaut, a guest lecturer at the International Space University, and she is the author of a book entitled Blast Off, Train Like an Astronaut for Success on Earth. A lot to talk about today, but Dr. Mindy Howard, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Ira.
Yeah, no, it's great having you today, Mindy. I'd love to start off basically by handing you the floor for a little bit to talk about your early journey. If you could take us back a ways to everything from where you grew up, when you developed your interest in STEM, and ultimately what got you interested in industrial engineering. To start off with, I think that'd be a great way to set the stage on what we can talk about.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a little bit of a cheesy story in terms of how I was inspired to want to go to space, but most people have their dream of wanting to go to space because they've seen the lunar landing or something historic like that, some kind of romantic historical thing. In my case, it was romantic, but it was in a different way. I was in love with a $6 Million Man. And that was a show in the early 70s.
Steve
Those
Austin.
who don't know, Steve Austin, astronaut, man barely alive. We can rebuild him.
Yep.
And so we have the technology. And this, to me, he was the cutest thing ever. And I started to think like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I could go to space with him hand in hand and fly around? And this was when I was about 6 years old. And I think that's actually where the idea originally started from, cheesy as it is. But then as I started to get a bit older, I was asking people, well, how does one become an astronaut anyway? And I had heard that, usually there's two ways. You can either become a pilot or you can become a mission specialist, where you would need to have like either a scientific degree or some kind of engineering degree. And I thought, okay, well, let's try to be a pilot first. So I rode away to the Air Force Academy in the States. So I grew up, in New York, and at that time applied to the Air Force Academy in the States. And I was told I was an inch too short which I thought was kind of ironic, you know, that the Air Force couldn't make a chair to accommodate somebody who was 5'3" at the time. So it was a little bit of a disappointment, but I thought, all right, well, I'm not going to give up so easily. Let's try the scientific / engineering route. And I then thought, okay, well, I don't really know exactly what I want to do, but I had heard, for example, engineering is a good thing to study, but I was always very interested in psychology. And so, you know, I wanted to actually study psychology, but I thought I need a technical degree. So industrial engineering had like the most people-oriented, you know, type of engineering degree with a heavy psychological focus. If you're talking about, you know, organizational design and efficiency, but also, you know, other types of psychological stuff when you're talking about how people make errors and how to train them. A lot of the roots of psychology and things about human behavior kind of come back into play when you're designing human machine systems. So I didn't even really know that much about engineering in general or industrial engineering. But I just thought, I heard about this. This is, you know, sounds like the most human engineering field there is. So I started to go through my bachelor's in the States. And, you know, it was hard for me the first 2 years of engineering school because it was all these technical courses that I had less affinity for, but kind of survived it. And then the last 2 years of my bachelor's, I was able to kind of move in the industrial engineering area. And that, you know, for me was a big change because I all of a sudden started to like the stuff that I was doing, designing human machine systems. And yeah, and then got my bachelor's at SUNY Buffalo, and then went and got my master's at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And then I had heard, you know, I thought, okay, well, can I apply to NASA now? And people said, well, you still really need a PhD if you want to go and, you know, and have any chance, whatsoever, of becoming an astronaut. So I thought, okay, how long does that take? And I was told in the States it would be about 6 to 10 years. And I thought, whoa, that's too long for me. Ain't nobody got time for that. Because for me, I was not really so much a researcher type, but I thought I need to do this in order to, you know, give myself any chance of getting close to being an astronaut. So I thought, okay, well, isn't there another way I can do this that doesn't take 6 to 10 years? And someone suggested, well, in Europe, on average, it takes about 4 years. And I thought, okay, I need to go somewhere in Europe. And then I started to apply to schools where I could do my thesis in English, and Holland was one of those places. And didn't know anybody in Holland, didn't essentially know what I was doing. I just knew that it would be 4 years in the Netherlands. And I ended up getting full funding at the university, Technical University of Eindhoven, where they said, come and do your PhD here. You'll be our first foreign female PhD student. You'll be an experiment.
Nice.
And if it goes well, more women will be welcomed. And if it doesn't go well, it might not be the case. So I was sort of feeling like I had to survive this for the sake of womankind at the University of Eindhoven. But anyway, I ended up getting my PhD 4 years later with some major culture shocks along the way. You know, having to learn how to speak some Dutch. And then I ended up applying right away to NASA and then getting on their, I guess it's the last 200 people out of the thousands, and that's called their highly qualified astronaut candidate list, which is kind of close, but no cigar. So it's one of these, you know, you're told just keep applying every other year, and you know, and it could happen. So, but it gave me, you know, it was a bit of a disappointment because I thought at that time that was the only way to get to space, was to essentially be like a NASA astronaut. Although when that didn't happen, I thought, what else can I do to increase my chances? So maybe if I became Dutch, I could apply to the European Space Administration. So I got my Dutch citizenship in 1995, applied to the European Space Administration, but they were not taking astronaut candidate applications. So that was a bust. So there I was, potentially able to become an astronaut in 2 countries, but not yet becoming one at that point. So that's how I ended up coming over here to the Netherlands, and then ended up, getting a great job working at the oil industry at Shell, and seeing the world and working in 35 different countries. So I never thought, I had to basically get a job on Earth, unfortunately, but I never forgot my dream. And until there was this reorganization in 2010, so I worked for them for 17 years, and then they were asking for volunteers of who wanted to leave the company with some money. So I raised my hand, and then they said, "Oh, we'll also help you secure your next job with the training. What do you want to do next?" And I thought, this is my time to kind of own up to the dream again. So I sort of looked at the career counselor and I said, well, what I want to do now is become an astronaut. And the career counselor thought, oh, that's so funny. Come on, what do you really want to do? And I said, no, that's really what I want to do. And I managed to convince him to send me away to the NASTAR Center that you mentioned earlier, where they have a centrifuge. And in that centrifuge is where commercial astronauts learn how to physically withstand the high G forces that they will get, let's say these Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin flights. And so essentially, I took this course, and Shell actually paid for it. And it was at that point that I had seen, some people were smiling from ear to ear in the centrifuge, and other people had a look like this on their faces, terrified. And I thought, hey, that's interesting. The person, the least who I would think the least likely guy who I thought would be scared was terrified. And then I started to think, hey, aren't there courses out there to help kind of mentally train people to get less scared? Did that exist? And they said, no, that didn't. And I thought, that's something I think I could do with my background. And then Inner Space Training, my company, was born. So it's a bit of a long story, but a lot of things like, I would never have expected that, I would get to where I was in the way that I did. It's a little bit strange, but we could talk more about, from that point on, about Inner Space Training or anything else in the past. But it's a bit of a strange story, but maybe it was meant to be anyway. Like
no, it's an awesome story, actually. It's and you still you still have the passion for it, and this so NASA does one thing, you look at the ESA. No, I think it's I think it's an awesome story, and just it seems so exciting now, obviously, as you were just mentioning, commercial, this term commercial astronaut. And I sit here like most people, here I'm on the East Coast of the United States. I'll turn the TV on, and what do I see? I see one of three faces. You're just saying, you either see Elon Musk, you see Richard Branson, or you see Jeff Bezos doing their thing. And the first thing comes to mind, because I love movies about space. I watch The Right Stuff or Apollo 13 and all this, and you see them doing the training and all that. When you say commercial astronaut, and we're come to things like SpaceX and Blue Origin and all that, are there a difference between, in terms of just the training that we see in the movies and what you and other folks are getting people prepared for, whether it's to go up for an hour or whatever they're doing? Is it the same thing, or is there a degree of intensity, discipline that hopefully we people like myself don't have to totally immerse? I guess I can't, the centrifuge, it might kill me, but what's the difference between a commercial astronaut and what we conventionally think of when we watch some of these movies?
Okay, I'll give you a little short course here, but don't. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, but anyway, so I think it's good to make a differentiation between training for suborbital space or orbital space. So you have your SpaceX people who are going to be going, for example, either what we just recently saw with the Inspiration 4 mission, where they did orbits around the Earth, 3 orbits around the Earth. These were civilians who had no training at all, or didn't have any background in being an astronaut. They had a decent training for what they had to do in terms of what they were going to be doing for their 3-day mission. But you'll have people who are going to be, let's say, using SpaceX to as a way to get to the International Space Station, who will be what some people would call more of a proper astronaut, an agency astronaut, or somebody being sent like from NASA or from ESA. These kind of astronauts will have a training which spans 2 to 3 years, where they will essentially have many different tasks that they need to do, whether that's fixing things on the space station or doing some sort of research of other people's experiments when they get there, that they first have to learn kind of on Earth, which buttons to push, how to go and operate whatever experiment it is. And then when they go to space, they'll be doing the same thing. So, when you're required to do a lot more for these further away missions that will last longer than a few hours, you have a lot more training, including learning how to use the toilet, learning how to eat in space, and a whole bunch of other things that you don't even need to think about if you're going on a suborbital flight, which, if you're talking about Blue Origin, it's a 10.5-minute flight from start to finish. If you're talking about Virgin Galactic, it's a 90-minute trip from start to finish. So, and those two different spacecrafts are different. So in terms of the G-forces that go onto the individual astronaut or commercial astronaut. But yet, in my opinion, it is, not unwise to train yourself to learn how to withstand those physical G-forces on you and learn how to stay calm for your space flight. Because even if you don't have a mission, like doing some kind of research on, let's say, a Virgin Galactic flight, and by the way, there also are researchers that will do experiments on these Virgin Galactic flights. So for that period of weightlessness of 4 minutes, they will have to execute some kind of an experiment, and they need to be able to stay calm and focused in order to do that. The majority of the people that are going on these suborbital flights are going more for their own fun and enjoyment, although they'll have different missions. I mean, some people might want to, make a rock video in space. Other people might want to do somersaults and, show off and, for their friends doing selfies. And others might just want to stare out the window and have the overview effect, or this feeling of oneness and connection with everything in the universe that many astronauts have had. And so everybody has a different sort of mission, even on these suborbital flights, and some missions are more challenging than others. So if you want to do several things that are challenging and shove that into 4 minutes and be flawless, ensure that you can execute that, I think it's wise to get training. But at the moment, these suborbital flights there's no regulations for these flights because the industry has heavily sort of lobbied, I think, the FAA in the past, which said, let's not kill the industry before it starts by having too many regulations.
Sure.
And now people can go to space without being trained at all. So what I expect is something in the future when they start to fly more regularly, that most people on your flight, because it's with 5 other people, so 6 people total fly together. There's no flight attendant, because that would take up an extra seat, and for commercial reasons, that's not. You can earn more money making that a paid passenger seat. So it's basically every person for themselves during the entire flight, and so if somebody has a problem, tough. And if somebody freaks out and gets in your way and you don't know how to deal with it, tough. You've signed a waiver, and that's the game now. And I think it's just going to take some incident or accident for somebody to do like somebody famous like Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie, and then all of a sudden people say, hey, are there no rules that people have to get trained to go to space? You mean anybody can go? I mean, William Shatner just went, a couple of weeks ago, and even though he was admitted that he was frightened of going completely to space, he still said that he wanted to do this and didn't get trained. And you saw the look on his face. I don't know if you saw it. I saw the
Yeah,
look on his face.
some crying.
He was completely white, and he looked not like he was enjoying himself. And afterwards, he still managed to have this incredible experience where it sounded like he had the overview effect happen to him, but he could have had a much better time had he been able to stay calm so he could completely enjoy everything that was happening to him around him. So at the moment, it's like I kind of say that back in the day when people were still flying airplanes, like just starting the commercial airline industry, people were allowed to smoke. There was no seatbelts. It was like that. And in the 50s until things like accidents started happening, and then regulations started happening, and people said, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't smoke on planes, and and wear some seatbelts and have some safety briefings." And then the industry changed. So let's hope it doesn't take that long for the industry to change for the commercial spaceflight industry, because let's say for the suborbital part of the spaceflight industry, those regulations are not there. So people do not have to have any training, which is astounding to me. But I don't think that will happen for too long. I cannot imagine that, things aren't going to be hitting the fan very quickly.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to be told tough when I go up if someone's freaking out. So yeah, I hopefully we'll move that needle a little bit. Mindy,
We'll see.
Yeah. So you founded Interspace Training. You also direct Interspace Training at Blue Abyss, and here you cover both psychological and physiological a range of issues that people will run into. Talk a little bit about what goes on, what you do at both organizations, and if I show up tomorrow and I'm like, hey, I want to be trained for suborbital flight. What's a program look like? Is there a program for suborbital flight? Can I pay extra and get the Mars package? Like, how does that all work in terms of the different degrees of physiological and psychological stresses that will impact me depending on what ship I want to get on?
Well, up until now, there hasn't been like a commercial astronaut training center that had everything under one roof. There was a place like NASTAR had, it's centrifuge. If you wanted to take a parabolic flight, there's a number of different parabolic flight providers. Interspace Training is the only mental training for commercial astronauts in terms of a space training program that's out there. So there hasn't been anything under one roof yet. Blue Abyss is the first company that wanted to sort of have it all under one roof, and they are just in their beginning stages of building a facility, and having the whole curriculum and everything be specified. So it's kind of in its infancy, although there's been a lot of thought that's gone in by people who will be, planning on working there in the future. Sorry. And so, like at the moment, Blue Abyss doesn't have its doors opened.
Okay.
But when they will open, hopefully in about 2 years' time, their people can then select a number of different training programs. But if what I say for suborbital space, it's kind of like the trifecta of space training, where you train for high G forces in a centrifuge, you train for low G forces or zero gravity in a parabolic flight, and your mental training, which kind of underpins everything that you do. To me, those three things are the minimal amount of training that one should have when doing a space flight. You can then add on other things in order, like if you were going to orbital space, you'd want to go and train underwater often in order to, for example, simulate the weightlessness environment while doing maybe a particular task underwater. And so Blue Abyss will be having this world-class, deepest pool, so that, these sort of missions can be trained first underwater. And I think Blue Abyss will also be, opening its doors for these kind of professional astronauts to also train there because, the neutral buoyancy laboratory at NASA, they say is not big enough for lunar and Mars training. So they're going to need a bigger facility. It was adequate for what it was used for in the past, but now with, long-term space missions, you're going to need a bigger facility to train in. So I wouldn't be surprised if Blue Abyss also had these sort of activities also happening, in the near future as well. But for commercial astronauts, I think these three elements of high G training in a centrifuge, low G in a parabolic flight, and mental training is the minimum. And then you can add other things like survival training, sea survival training. So if you were to land in the water and you needed to get out of the spacecraft, like often spacecrafts will have a water landing, and you'll have the helicopters come and sort of rescue the astronauts and get them out. But if they, for whatever reason, got lost or didn't have people arrive at the right time, you need to be able to know what you're doing and how to get out and get, save yourself. So these sort of trainings are important, and they're definitely done by these professional astronauts, but more and more in the commercial astronaut scene, these other add-ons of training will help give astronauts more self-confidence about they can handle anything that comes their way. Because, commercial astronauts, let's say, have to do the least compared to the professional astronauts, which have to do the most and know the most. So it makes more sense that they have the most training. But I think the more training you do, the more you feel like you can, you become more mentally resilient and you can handle anything. And that is really what, I think the right frame of mind to go when you're going up into space, because, it's one thing to be able to control yourself. The next level is to be able to sort of help people around you who might need help in a situation, either, an abnormal situation or an emergency. And if you're just basically keeping your own stuff together, you're not going to be able to help other people. And so, I think in the future, the more you do and of these sort of experiences, the better off and more self-confident you'll feel, and the more useful you'll be to others. So with the long-term space missions to Mars, you won't have the assistance of people being able to fly in and rescue you. You're going to have to be, competent individuals to save yourselves in whatever way that is, or to think about things that haven't been thought about, and how to, how to turn your toothbrush into a wrench, in order to fix something so this mental resilience, will start to become more and more and more important the more complex your mission becomes, actually. The less sort of help you can get from other people on the ground, ground control, that sort of stuff.
Along those lines, and just this is a side question, but Matt Damon's character in The Martian, is anyone ever trained at NASA to be that good? If they are left alone on Mars, does that type of training actually, or is that just Hollywood?
Yeah, I can't. It's funny. I've seen the movie a few years ago, but now it's not coming up to me what exactly he did.
He was like a botanist, but I mean, he knew about everything else. He could, do the hydrogen fuel cells and everything. Right. He knew how, basically figured out everything. And I was just, wow, did they really train them that well? or is that?
It's funny. It's funny because there are some differences between the Russians and the Americans in terms of culture and how what sort of individual would be the best kind of astronaut. And I think in the past, NASA NASA trained people on different scenarios, and they came up with all sorts of scenarios, things that could go wrong, how they went wrong, and then would train people. And so that in theory, astronauts, or the training consisted of all the scenarios and trained over and over and over so that they would get used to anything that could come up. And the Russians were much more about improvisation, and that, this Matt Damon sort of approach where you need to be less, more mentally resilient, but able to, think about something out of the box as a way to save yourself. And I think, just in terms of types of people that they choose, I think that is the traditional Russian astronaut that can make the wrench out of a toothbrush, and NASA would be first to call home and say, hey, ground control, can you help? I need a wrench, you know?
Yeah.
So there are some differences, some cultural differences, and I'm not sure, you know, how much NASA is training this other sort of out of the box thinker. More, you know, some people could say they're, you know, as long as you're trainable, you could become a NASA astronaut. And I think the Russians have, you know, a slightly different philosophy as far as that goes.
Interesting. Yeah. Mindy, you know, one of the things, you know, you and I chatted about before the show, we talked a little about the twin study that was being done at NASA on the Kelly twins, and some of the biologic differences and changes that they studied after, I guess it was a year on the International Space Station. Sorry to keep coming back to Hollywood, but I think of the John Hurt's character in that was the Jodie Foster movie. Yeah. The one with the alien signals and all that. Anyway, so John Hurt's character is out there, and he's hanging out on the space station because he has cancer, and there's these unique properties of zero gravity. We've been reading some stuff lately about hyperbaric oxygen chambers doing possibly beneficial things for people with Alzheimer's. Any interesting health-related either positive or negative that you see in some of these unique training scenarios that we might not hear about in the common press, but are like, wow, that's pretty cool or interesting, psychological or physiological?
You know, I'm not in that world as much as you would, like in terms of hearing these different types of studies. I mean, I have heard some studies about, you know, how horrible radiation is, and how, you know,
sure,
people will suffer, like men and women will suffer in different ways coming back from, you know, from space, you know, whether it's cancer or poor vision or mental capacity, and, you know, and which sticks with certain types of individuals. So, I mean, the radiation is still going to be the biggest dilemma of how we can get ourselves, you know, to be spacefaring, because, you know, our bodies are just not really able to adapt to this radiation so far. So I don't I don't have any sort of clever bits of wisdom for you there, but I mean, it's not exactly my world. It's more stuff that I read about in the field.
That's cool. I was just wondering, you know, because it's you know, it's obviously not a lot of people go up to the space station and hang out that long, but and the movie was Contact, by the way. I don't know why I couldn't pull that out of the air.
Right.
Anyway, so talk a little bit about the book. The book Blast Off, and you're focusing on techniques that you're learning and working in terms of the commercial astronaut training, but how some of this physiological and psychological resiliency, emotional equilibrium, mental focus, very useful for us in our day-to-day lives here on terrestrial planet Earth. Talk a little bit about the book, if you would.
Sure. You know, I think, you know, going to space could be very much like it's used as a metaphor for going on any kind of transformational journey. And that, you know, so problems that astronauts will have in terms of getting over any kind of fears or uncertainties about making the journey, whether that's physical, mental, or other sort of limiting beliefs, you know, that's the same as if we were going on some other kind of transformational journey here on Earth. So I think when I started doing trainings, you know, inner space training, you know, there were people in my course that would say, you know, how come you're not opening this up for non-astronauts? Because, you know, this technique would be really good, you know, if I'm doing public speaking and I am shaking in my shoes and I need to be able to perform under pressure. And after a while, I remember thinking, well, maybe I should, you know, open up the training to non-astronauts, and so I did, and they seemed to get enough, you know. Lo and behold, you know, they got a lot out of the training as well. So I thought about, you know, that idea and thought, you know what, it'd be great to write a book for anybody going on a transformational journey, and because I took essentially the inner space training and the different tools and techniques that we give the astronauts, and I apply them to everyday life to help people kind of not be afraid to dare to dream and to go and try, to go and move in, to accomplish what they would like to accomplish in life, or to dream and actually live their dream. And sometimes, it just takes people to understand, to get over their fear, or to get over their limiting beliefs, and they'd be surprised what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
So the book is essentially, for those people, inspired by space and space training, but it's as applied to, everyday life and how we can go and accomplish our dreams here. And so the book, so it discusses a number of different techniques. And some of the techniques are simple, and well, depends. They're simple to learn and simple to use, and others use some neurofeedback technology, which can be actually bought on the market, where you can, I've seen it with, so often where people will say, I'm claustrophobic, I want to fly, but I have fear of flying. I want to do this, but how do I get over this? And you can, using this neurofeedback tool, it's called the bioacoustical utilization device, otherwise known as the BAUD. The BAUD can be used to help people get over, fears, actually chronic pain. Mm-hmm. I've used it on my knee. I have some knee issues, and so I've seen it work in so many different instances, because it's all kind of playing with the brain circuitry of how pain and fear are all kind of like are wiring in the amygdala, in the emotional brain, and how we can, if we can, disturb this, this pain circuit or this fear circuit, we can be over the fear in a matter of minutes. And it's so satisfying to see, people, use a device like this, and 15 minutes later, they're able to get into a plane and fly, so it's pretty amazing, to see also how much we could, use technology to help, just sort of like these limiting beliefs and fears that we have, and how quickly we can get over some of them. So it's, I really enjoy doing that. That's one of the techniques that we're using, in the, or that's actually sort of like an additional thing that I can do, additional technique with people who have special fears. But within inner space training, we're helping people, first of all, giving them information about what they can expect on their space flight, in terms of telling them everything that can happen, and what are the demands that you need to do. So that will help reduce any kind of anxiety that they have. But also how you define your own success, and setting your intentions for your space flight. So if you are, if you have a very narrow focus of, this is what I want to accomplish, and it's got to have to look like this, and somebody's foot by accident comes your direction, in zero gravity, will you still be okay? Will you still accomplish your mission? Or will this throw you off so much that you'll completely lose your whole, your focus? And how do you deal with unexpected things that happen? So first of all, defining success, if you have a wider definition, you'll have higher chance of having success. But if you have like, no, it's got to look like this, and it's got to have these elements, chances are high you will not be successful. And that's the same, in life as well. As soon as you have expectations, and a lot of, specific expectations, life will probably disappoint you more often than not. And because if you just say, well, my intention is to, is to fly to space and to do these things, and how it happens, I leave up to the universe, but I have an open mind, and everything is enjoyment. That's a completely different sort of mindset, so that you're really setting yourself up for success, versus like, it didn't happen in the way that it was this. And it also gives you the opportunity, to enjoy something that you might not have even thought about in life, something even better than you imagined. But if you define it only in this, very rational way, you won't have that possibility of something even better. So I think expectation setting, versus intention setting, is really something people can learn and benefit from also here on Earth too. And I hear myself sometimes when I have too many expectations and I got to cut and say, no. I'm hearing myself speak about something and I think, stop, let's do this. Let's think about this in a different way, because I'll just be setting myself up for disappointment. So having that mindset is helpful in terms of a resilient mindset. And then we do a lot of learning about like a mnemonic device called Babusa, which is standing for, different parts of like breathing, observing, sensing, and anchoring different types of, calm, focused feelings. When you kind of like practice this over and over, you start to get good at learning how to calm yourself and accepting things coming your way, regardless of, if it's what you expect or not, and how to deal with it. And I think one of the biggest things that we talk about is how to, in inner space training, is how to turn lemons into lemonade, because it's so often that something comes out of right field and you're going to have to respond, and you have a choice in how you want to respond. Like, hey, wait, this is not how we planned it. And then trying to fight the system and say, I need to figure this out because it's not, the way it was supposed to be. Yep. Or to say, oh, look, a lemon flying my direction. Like, let's go and see if we can incorporate that into what we're using right now. And who knows, maybe it will become lemonade. So it's all kind of how you want to deal with stuff that comes your way. And that's like a life philosophy, as well as a space flight philosophy that everybody can have, I think.
That's awesome. And opening up the hatch and throwing somebody out is never the acceptable option. So
you might want to on occasion, but somehow we have to find other ways to deal with these kinds of people.
Exactly. Mindy, one other thing I wanted to ask you about is while I have you here, earlier I read through your bio, and you spent a lot of time in sort of this area of sustainable development, the environment, carbon dioxide management, and so forth. And obviously the climate conference just wrapped up. As you think forward with regard to the development of commercial space, and whether we have one SpaceX rocket up there or 1,000 or whatever's going to be happening in the coming decades, any thoughts on sort of keeping that suborbital realm or above the suborbital realm sort of sustainable and healthy, and not having a lot of space junk and so forth? Well, just give us a couple minutes on that one, if you would.
Okay. Well, I would say I very much have this environmental, sustainable kind of focus on how to do this kind of business responsibly, or else I don't think we should be doing it. And at the moment, I'm not actually seeing lots of commercial and non-commercial spaceflight, operators, dealing with it. Like they the way they're dealing with it is saying, well, the fuel that we use is not that pollutive. In fact, it's the same as a trip from New York to London. But if you divide it by 6 people taking a flight versus 200 people, your carbon footprint per person is actually quite high. So I think that, these companies need to do more, in my opinion, to offset the damage that they're going to be doing. I don't think you can take a flight. You can justify taking a flight without, at least offsetting the damage by tree planting or creating, different, wind parks or whatever sustainable energy, project you want to support. I think there's got to be an active acknowledgement, or an acknowledgement that, yes, we understand this is not the most environmentally friendly way of having an industry, but on the other hand, space has inspired lots of environmentally friendly and technologies here on Earth. So I don't think we should ban space activities from happening, but I do think we need to we need to start offsetting our flights. We need to have people I think it's like a privilege to go to space. And if you're going to, and yes, you might have the money to go, but if you go, I think you also need to do some environmental or social projects back on Earth, like as part of your privilege to go, that you're going to, you're going to have to go and kind of pay, not just pay your money, but then make things better, make the world better by, your space flight. And that could be by supporting a number of different projects, environmental, social projects here on Earth, because I just don't think it's good enough to have a jolly. I think, because I could see why people get pissed off, with all these, people with money going and, if they think it's just another way to go and have fun without any kind of responsibility in it. So I personally think that these companies need to, set up programs, whether it's like environmental offsetting programs or social programs where, you can grow prosperity in other parts of the world that don't have it, that people have to, take part actively in these environmental and social programs, or else they're not allowed to go. I mean, that's how I would do it. And just, it's not good enough just to pay money.
Yep.
That's what I think. But I've tried to mention that idea to some people in the industry. And of course, for commercial reasons, some companies don't want to yet adopt this, even though some individuals are doing this on their own within, those people are going, but it's not a systematic approach. And I think it needs to become systematic. So we can justify and say, this is not only harmful, that this is also a force for good. And it's using, people are being transformed, not just by the experience of being able to see the Earth from a different perspective, but actually, use that to encourage change and transformation, both within yourself and back on Earth. So it's like a whole package of transformation. So, and not just like a jolly for one, and not having really transformation. That's my opinion.
No, it's awesome. And as I was thinking about this question, as you were talking, and I'm glad that you had the ability to give your input there, because I think it's an extremely important piece of the puzzle, especially in the unique world we're entering in 2022, and with climate change and the environment being such a top of mind issue. So thank you for definitely participating in that. Okay, one other thing before we wrap up, I too was a major fan of the $6 Million Man growing up. So lightning round here. And don't worry, I won't hold it against you if you don't know these, but you probably do. What was Steve Austin's boss's name?
Oscar Golden.
Okay, very good. Who played the cybernetic Sasquatch?
Cybernetic Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Oh.
The Sasquatch episode? Actually, there's two Sasquatch episodes. Andre the Giant. Yeah.
Andre the Giant, of course.
Yep.
Oh.
And
I could have known that. Okay. Next.
And then obviously, we used to think of back, if the $6 Million Man fought the Bionic Woman, who would win?
I've thought about that. Strangely enough, because they both had bionic legs.
Right. But
she had the ears, he had the eyes, and I can't remember the arms. He had an arm, didn't he? He
only had one arm, but she had two arms. So that's I personally think that there you go. That's
I don't know. I think she could hear him coming from a long distance. So who knows? Like, I don't know. I admired the Bionic Woman, but at the time I was jealous. And so I thought, she was getting him and I wasn't. So I had kind of like double feeling about how great she really was. But now as an adult, I could make an assessment and say, yeah, she could probably take him.
Yeah. I thought we have more bionics by now, looking back to the 1970s and 2022, but whatever.
I still want it to become bionic. I mean, like, I still do, but now maybe with a new knee next year that I might be getting, that'll be my new bionic knee.
There you go. Well, Mindy, this is really a fun time talking to you and hearing your story. It's been an amazing journey. It's going to be amazing continue watching your journey. Before I let you go, any stuff coming up in 2022 that you want to mention? Any conferences you're going to be talking about? New TED Talks you're going to be giving? Please, if there's anything I missed, please take the floor.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't have any offhand things that I mean, I haven't even seen anything for 2022, but yeah, in the space world, I mean, there's a couple of key conferences that come up, and I'm hopefully will be part of them. Just in a week's time, this Australian conference, the ASBX conference, is going to be happening. So I've got to talk on that. Yeah, and in I think in a couple of weeks' time at the University of Twente, another Dutch university, there'll be a talk coming up as well. So that's all I have so far. And for the rest of the year, next year is unknown a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. Thank you for letting me mention these two talks too.
Well, and we will, we will put all the links in the bio anyway to your various initiatives and your book. Really fascinating talk and story, Mindy. For everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode across the various podcasts or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Mindy Howard, future astronaut, founding director and lead trainer, Inner Space Training, director of Inner Space Training, Blue Abyss Diving. Pick up her book, Blast Off, Train Like an Astronaut for Success on Earth. Mindy, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us. Thanks for everything you're doing there. And as we like to say on this show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us via your work. Very inspiring story.
Pleasure. Thank you.